My friend, I want to talk to you today about something that may sound a little unusual at first. We are often told to be kind, to love everyone, to give without question. But what if I told you that sometimes kindness can be a burden? That there are moments when constantly giving, constantly saying yes, constantly putting others first can drain you, weaken you, and even pull you away from God's purpose for your life. Now, don't misunderstand me. The Bible calls us to love, to serve, to be compassionate. But it also calls us to be wise, to guard our hearts, and to know when to stand firm. If you're always being kind to everyone at the cost of your own well-being, you may be walking outside of God's will. So today I want to challenge you. Stop being kind to everyone. Instead, be kind with wisdom. Be kind with discernment. Be kind the way God intends, not the way the world demands. Kindness is a beautiful trait, a virtue that reflects the love of God and the compassion we are called to have for others. But kindness, when given without boundaries, can become a heavy burden. It can wear you down, drain your energy, and leave you feeling empty. Many people walk through life believing that their duty is to always be available, always be accommodating, always say yes to every request that comes their way. They feel guilty when they even think about setting limits, as if doing so would make them selfish or unloving. But the reality is that kindness without boundaries is not only unhealthy, it's unsustainable. We've all seen it happen. Maybe it's happening to you right now. You're the one people call when they need something. You're the one who says yes even when you're exhausted. You're the one who sacrifices your own time, your own peace, and sometimes even your own needs just to make others happy. And at first it feels good, it feels right. You tell yourself that this is what it means to be a good person, to be a good Christian, to be someone who loves others unconditionally. But over time, something shifts. You start to feel drained, unappreciated, even resentful. The joy you once had in serving others starts to fade, replaced by a sense of obligation, even frustration. You begin to wonder why no one ever seems to check in on you the way you check in on them. Why no one offers you the same level of kindness and support that you so freely give to them. The truth is, people will take as much as you are willing to give. That's not to say they are always doing it intentionally or maliciously. Many times, people simply get used to the fact that you are always available, always willing to help, always putting their needs before your own. And when you start to feel exhausted, they don't notice, because they've come to expect that this is just who you are. This is where the danger lies. When your kindness becomes an expectation rather than an appreciated gift. Think about it. If you never set boundaries, if you never say no, if you never take a step back and guard your time and energy, what happens? You become depleted. And when you are depleted, you are no longer operating from a place of love, but from a place of obligation. True kindness flows from a full heart, from a place of strength and wisdom. But when you give endlessly without refilling your own cup, your kindness loses its joy, its authenticity, and eventually, its effectiveness. God never intended for you to run yourself into the ground for the sake of being kind. Jesus himself set boundaries. He withdrew from crowds to pray. He rested when he needed to, and he did not give in to every demand placed upon him. He knew his purpose, and he knew that in order to fulfill it, he could not be everything to everyone at all times. He showed kindness, but he did so with wisdom. He knew when to help and when to step away. If even Jesus, the Son of God, recognized the need for balance, how much more do we need it in our own lives? Some people will make you feel guilty for setting limits. They will call you selfish, accuse you of not caring, or try to manipulate you into feeling bad for not always being available to them. But that is not love. That is not friendship. That is not what God calls you to. There is nothing wrong with helping others, but there is something very wrong with allowing yourself to be used to the point of exhaustion. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot be a source of kindness and encouragement to others if you yourself are drained, weary, and overwhelmed. The key is to be kind with wisdom, to understand that your time, energy, and emotional well-being matter, to know that it is okay to say no, to step back, to take care of yourself. That doesn't make you unkind. That makes you responsible. It makes you intentional about where you invest your kindness so that it can have the greatest impact. Because when you set healthy boundaries, when you take care of yourself, when you are wise about where and how you give your kindness, you are able to love others more fully and effectively. Not everyone in your life deserves unlimited access to you. This might sound harsh at first, especially if you have been conditioned to believe that being a good person means always being available, always being open, and always saying yes to the needs of others. But the reality is that not every person has good intentions, and not every relationship is beneficial. Some people take more than they give, drain more than they replenish, and expect more than they are ever willing to offer in return. If you do not recognize this and establish clear boundaries, you will find yourself constantly exhausted, emotionally depleted, and spiritually drained. There are people who come into your life not to support you, but to use you. They recognize your kindness, your generosity, and your willingness to help, and they take advantage of it. They know that no matter how many times they call, you will answer. No matter how much they ask for, you will give. No matter how much they take, you will not push back. And because of that, they continue to pull from you without ever considering what it is costing you. Some of them do this intentionally, manipulating your good nature for their own benefit, while others do it out of habit simply because they have never been told no. The problem is, when you allow people unlimited access to your time, energy, and emotions, you are giving away parts of yourself that may not be replenished. You may find yourself constantly trying to meet the expectations of others, running from one request to the next, always trying to be there for everyone. But the more you do this, the less of yourself you have left. Your peace begins to suffer. Your joy begins to fade. Your purpose begins to get lost in the constant demands placed upon you. And before long, you start to feel resentment creeping in. You start to notice how one-sided these relationships are, how much you are giving compared to how little you are receiving. God did not call you to be a doormat. He did not create you to be at the mercy of every person who wants a piece of you. He created you with purpose, with value, and with the responsibility to steward your time and energy wisely. This means you have to be selective about who you allow into your inner circle. You have to be discerning about who you give your time and attention to. It is not unkind to set boundaries. It is not selfish to protect your peace. It is wisdom. Jesus himself did not give everyone unlimited access to him. He loved everyone, yes, but he was selective about who he spent his time with. He had 12 disciples, but even among them, he had an inner circle, Peter, James, and John. He did not allow every person he encountered to dictate his schedule or determine his priorities. He knew his mission and he stayed focused on it. There were times when he withdrew from the crowds, times when he stepped away from the demands of others, times when he said no. If Jesus, the Son of God, understood the importance of boundaries, how much more should we? Some people will try to make you feel guilty for limiting their access to you. They will accuse you of being selfish, unloving, or uncaring. They will remind you of all the times you were there for them, as if that alone is reason enough to continue allowing them to take from you without limit. But you must remember that true relationships are built on mutual respect, not one-sided expectations. A real friend, a real supporter, will not resent you for setting boundaries. They will understand and respect them. You must also be careful not to let guilt manipulate you into overextending yourself. Just because you have the ability to help someone does not mean you are obligated to do so every time they ask. Just because someone has been in your life for a long time does not mean they are entitled to unlimited access to you. Relationships should be reciprocal. If someone only comes to you when they need something but disappears when you need support, that is a sign of an unhealthy relationship. If someone constantly drains your energy but never pours anything back into you, that is a sign that they do not deserve unlimited access to you. There is a difference between being kind and being used. There is a difference between being generous and being taken advantage of. There is a difference between being available and being constantly drained. It is your responsibility to recognize these differences and to protect yourself accordingly. You cannot be everything to everyone, and you are not meant to be. You have to be intentional about where you invest your time and energy, because not everyone is worthy of it. Jesus was the most compassionate, loving, and merciful person to ever walk the earth, yet he did not say yes to everyone. He did not heal every sick person in Israel, nor did he answer every request that came his way. He loved without limits, but he helped with wisdom. Many people assume that being Christ-like means never turning anyone away, always being available, and constantly putting others ahead of ourselves. But Jesus himself did not operate this way. He set boundaries. He walked away from certain situations, and he prioritized his mission over the demands of people. Understanding this is crucial because it shows that kindness and compassion must be paired with discernment. There were moments when Jesus withdrew from crowds, not because he stopped caring, but because he knew the importance of rest, prayer, and alignment with the Father. He would often retreat to solitary places to pray, even when people were searching for him. He did not allow the expectations of others to dictate his actions. If he had, he would have spent every moment healing and teaching, never taking time to rest or be alone with God. But he knew that in order to fulfill his purpose, he had to be intentional about where he spent his time and energy. One clear example of this is in Mark 1:35-38, where Jesus gets up early to pray in solitude. When his disciples find him, they tell him that everyone is looking for him, expecting him to return and continue ministering to the crowds. But instead of going back, he tells them that they need to move on to other towns because that is why he came. He did not let the demands of people keep him in one place when he knew his purpose required him to move forward. Many of us struggle with this. We feel guilty for not always being available, for not always saying yes, for not meeting every need that presents itself. But Jesus shows us that there are times when walking away is necessary. Another powerful example is found in John 5 at the pool of Bethesda. There was a multitude of sick and disabled people gathered there, all waiting for a miracle. But Jesus did not heal everyone. He approached one man, asked him if he wanted to be healed, and then restored him. He could have healed every single person there, but he did not. This was not because he lacked compassion, but because his actions were guided by divine wisdom, not human expectation. If Jesus, with all of his power and love, did not heal every person he encountered, why do we feel the need to say yes to everyone who asks for something from us? Jesus also set boundaries in his relationships. He loved all people, but he did not allow everyone the same level of access to him. He had many followers, but only 12 disciples. And even among the 12, Peter, James, and John were the ones closest to him. He did not spend equal time with everyone, nor did he feel obligated to give everyone the same level of intimacy. When he went to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane before his crucifixion, he took only 3 of his disciples with him, leaving the others behind. He understood that not everyone could handle certain moments, and he was intentional about who he allowed into his inner circle. This is something we must learn as well. We can love everyone, but that does not mean everyone should have the same level of access to us. Another example of Jesus setting limits is in Matthew 10:14, where he tells his disciples that if they go into a town and the people do not receive them, they should shake the dust off their feet and move on. He did not instruct them to keep trying, to keep pushing, or to exhaust themselves in places where they were not welcomed. He taught them that it was okay to walk away when people did not respect their message. Sometimes in our effort to be kind, we stay in situations far longer than we should. We keep trying to help people who have no intention of changing. We keep giving to those who only take, and we keep extending grace to those who repeatedly take advantage of us. But Jesus shows us that there is a time to let go and move on. Even when confronted by those who opposed him, Jesus did not waste energy trying to prove himself. When the Pharisees constantly tested him and tried to trap him in his words, he did not always engage. Sometimes he answered them with a question, sometimes he walked away, and sometimes he remained silent. He did not feel the need to explain himself to those who were not genuinely seeking truth. Many of us exhaust ourselves trying to justify our actions, trying to convince people of our worth, or trying to maintain relationships that drain us. But Jesus did not live to meet the expectations of others. He lived to fulfill his purpose. We are called to be like Christ, but that does not mean being endlessly available or allowing ourselves to be taken advantage of. It means loving with wisdom, serving with discernment, and knowing when to step away. Jesus was kind, but he was not a people pleaser. He was compassionate, but he was not afraid to say no. If we truly want to follow his example, we must learn to set boundaries just as he did. Many people fall into the trap of believing that being kind to everyone means making everyone happy. They confuse love with approval, thinking that in order to show Christ's love, they must never disappoint, never refuse, and never establish boundaries. But there is a significant difference between pleasing people and pleasing God. When you live to please people, you will find yourself constantly chasing their expectations, bending to their demands, and losing sight of who you are in the process. No matter how much you do, no matter how much you give, it will never be enough, because people's expectations are endless. The moment you meet one request, another will arise. The moment you solve one problem for someone, they will come to you with another. If you are not careful, your life will become consumed with trying to keep others happy, even at the cost of your own well-being. God did not create you to live for the approval of others. He created you for his purpose, and his purpose will not always align with what people want from you. Sometimes obeying God will mean disappointing people. It will mean saying no when they expect you to say yes. It will mean walking away from relationships that are not serving his plan for your life. It will mean prioritizing his voice over the opinions of those around you. This is not easy, especially for those who have been conditioned to believe that love means always giving, always saying yes, and always being available. But true obedience to God requires the courage to stand firm, even when others don't understand. Jesus himself was not a people pleaser. He did not live to gain the approval of others. In fact, he often did things that made people uncomfortable, confused, or even angry. He healed on the Sabbath despite the outrage of religious leaders. He associated with sinners despite the judgment of those who thought he should only be with the righteous. He overturned the tables in the temple despite the expectation that he should be meek and passive. If Jesus had been concerned with making everyone happy, he would not have fulfilled his purpose. He did not come to earth to win the approval of men, but to do the will of the Father. One of the clearest examples of this is found in John 6, when Jesus was teaching a large crowd. The people loved him as long as he was performing miracles and feeding them. But when he began to teach hard truths, many of them turned away. He did not beg them to stay. He did not change his message to make them comfortable. He let them go because his mission was not to keep a crowd, but to fulfill God's will. Many of us struggle with this. We fear losing people. We fear being misunderstood. We fear rejection. So we compromise. We shrink ourselves to fit into spaces where we no longer belong. We say yes when we need to say no. We tolerate things we should walk away from. But in doing so, we trade God's purpose for temporary approval. The Apostle Paul understood this well. In Galatians 1:10, he wrote, "Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. He recognized that living for God and living for people's approval are two very different things. You cannot do both. If your focus is on making everyone happy, you will compromise your values, your convictions, and your calling. You will make decisions based on fear, fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of not being liked. But when you choose to live for God, you will find peace in knowing that your worth is not based on people's opinions, but on His purpose for your life. Some people will not like the boundaries you set. They will not like that you are no longer available at their every request. They will not like that you are no longer willing to be taken advantage of. They will push back. They will accuse you of being unkind, selfish, or unloving. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to walk in wisdom, to steward your time and energy well, and to obey God above all else. When you stop living for people's approval, you will find freedom. You will no longer feel the pressure to be everything to everyone. You will no longer feel drained by trying to meet impossible expectations. You will no longer feel controlled by guilt and obligation. Instead, you will have clarity, peace, and the ability to give in ways that truly honor God. It is important to understand that saying no does not make you unkind. Setting boundaries does not make you unloving. Prioritizing your well-being does not make you selfish. It makes you wise. It makes you intentional. It makes you effective in the ways that truly matter. God has called you to love people, but He has not called you to be controlled by them. When you fully embrace this truth, you will begin to live with greater purpose, greater strength, and greater freedom. Many people believe that in order to be kind, they must always say yes, always be available, and always put others ahead of themselves. They feel that turning someone down or setting a boundary is an act of selfishness, something that goes against the idea of being a good person. But true kindness is not about being endlessly available or allowing yourself to be drained by the demands of others. True kindness requires wisdom. It requires discernment. It requires knowing when to give and when to withhold, when to help and when to step back, when to say yes and when to say no. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that their role in life is to meet the needs of everyone around them. They take on every request, absorb every problem, and carry burdens that were never meant for them. Over time, this leads to exhaustion, resentment, and burnout. They begin to feel unappreciated, unnoticed, and undervalued. But the problem is not that others are taking too much. It is that they have never learned to set healthy limits. They have convinced themselves that love means sacrificing their own well-being for the sake of others. But in doing so, they end up giving from a place of emptiness rather than abundance. There is a difference between helping out of love and helping out of obligation. When you give out of love, you do so freely, joyfully, and with no expectation of return. But when you give out of obligation, you do so reluctantly, with frustration, and often with resentment building beneath the surface. The difference is not in the action, but in the motivation behind it. If you find yourself constantly feeling exhausted, bitter, or frustrated in your kindness, it may be because you are giving from a place of obligation rather than a place of wisdom. Jesus demonstrated what it means to give with wisdom. He did not meet every need. He did not heal every sick person. He did not answer every request. He was kind, but he was also discerning. There were times when he withdrew from crowds, times when he rested, and times when he said no. He understood that his time, energy, and purpose were valuable, and he did not allow others to dictate how he used them. This was not an act of selfishness. It was an act of wisdom. He knew that in order to be effective, he had to be intentional. He did not let the expectations of others pull him away from his mission. Many people struggle with guilt when they start setting boundaries. They worry that saying no will make them seem unkind, unloving, or unhelpful. They fear disappointing others, so they continue to overextend themselves, saying yes when they should say no, taking on more than they can handle, and allowing others to take advantage of their kindness. But guilt is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is often a sign that you are breaking free from unhealthy patterns. If you have spent your entire life believing that your worth is tied to how much you do for others, then setting boundaries will feel uncomfortable at first. But discomfort is part of growth. There will always be people who expect more from you than you can give. There will always be those who try to make you feel guilty for not meeting their demands. But you do not exist to meet every expectation placed upon you. You do not exist to be everything to everyone. If you try, you will lose yourself in the process. Your time, energy, and emotional well-being are valuable, and you must protect them. Setting boundaries is not about being unkind. It is about being wise. It is about recognizing that you cannot pour into others if you are running on empty. Some people will walk away when you start setting limits. They will not like that you are no longer available to them at all times. They will push back, complain, and try to manipulate you into going back to the way things were. But the people who truly value and respect you will understand. They will not resent you for protecting your peace. They will not see your boundaries as rejection, but as an act of self-respect. Healthy relationships are built on mutual understanding, not one-sided expectation. There is nothing wrong with helping others, but there is something wrong with allowing yourself to be used. There is nothing wrong with being kind, but there is something wrong with letting others take advantage of your kindness. It is not selfish to say no. It is not unkind to step away from toxic relationships. It is not wrong to prioritize your own well-being. True kindness is not about pleasing everyone. It is about giving with wisdom, loving with discernment, and knowing when to set limits. When you understand this, you will find that your kindness is no longer a source of exhaustion, but a source of strength. Many people go through life believing that they are doing the right thing by constantly putting others first, by saying yes to every request, by being available at all times, and by never turning anyone away. They take pride in their kindness, in their ability to give, and their willingness to sacrifice for others. But over time, they begin to feel drained, exhausted, and even resentful. They start to realize that no matter how much they give, it is never enough. No matter how many times they say yes, people still want more. No matter how much they sacrifice, there are still those who take them for granted. This is not because kindness is wrong, but because kindness without boundaries leads to burnout. There is a difference between being kind and being wise. True kindness does not mean allowing others to take advantage of you. It does not mean sacrificing your own well-being for the sake of people who do not appreciate it. It does not mean saying yes to things that drain you simply because you feel guilty saying no. Kindness should come from a place of strength, not exhaustion. It should be given freely, not forced out of obligation. When you operate from a mindset that tells you kindness means never saying no, you end up giving more than you have, and that is not sustainable. Jesus was kind, compassionate, and full of love, but he was not a people pleaser. He did not allow himself to be manipulated. He did not meet every demand placed upon him. He did not let the expectations of others dictate his actions. There were times when he healed and helped, but there were also times when he walked away. There were times when he spoke with love and gentleness, but there were also times when he rebuked those who tried to take advantage of his kindness. If Jesus, who was perfect in love, knew when to say no, then we must learn to do the same. One of the biggest reasons people struggle with setting boundaries is because they fear rejection. They worry that if they say no, people will be disappointed in them, will think less of them, or will even walk away. This fear keeps them stuck in a cycle of overgiving, overextending, and overcommitting. But the reality is that the people who truly value you will not leave because you set a boundary. The people who respect you will not resent you for protecting your time and energy. The only people who get upset when you start setting limits are the ones who were benefiting from your lack of them. Some people will try to manipulate you by making you feel guilty for saying no. They will accuse you of being selfish, of not caring, of not being as kind as you used to be. But guilt is not proof that you are doing something wrong. Guilt is often a sign that you are breaking free from unhealthy patterns. If you have spent your entire life believing that love means always saying yes, then saying no will feel uncomfortable at first. But discomfort is part of the growth process. It means you are learning to prioritize your well-being, to value your time, and to give from a place of strength rather than depletion. There is nothing wrong with helping others, but you must recognize that not everyone deserves unlimited access to your kindness. Some people will take and take without ever giving anything in return. Some will drain you emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually, leaving you empty and exhausted. You cannot be everything to everyone, nor should you try to be. Even Jesus did not heal every sick person, did not stay in one place to meet every need, did not allow everyone the same level of access to him. He loved deeply, but he also loved wisely. When you begin to set boundaries, you will find that some people disappear from your life. They will not like that you are no longer available at their convenience. They will not like that you are no longer saying yes to everything. They will not like that you are standing firm instead of bending to their expectations. But this is not a loss, it is a gain. When the wrong people leave your life, it makes room for the right people to come in. When you stop trying to please everyone, you begin to walk in the freedom of knowing that your worth is not tied to what you can do for others. You are not here to be used, to be drained, or to be manipulated. You are here to fulfill God's purpose for your life. And that means protecting your time, energy, and emotional well-being. It means being kind, but also being wise. It means giving, but also knowing when to withhold. It means saying yes, but also knowing when to say no. When you learn this balance, you will find that your kindness is no longer a burden, but a blessing.